back, everybody. It is the Working Brother back at you with another talk. This time we've got John Bosnitch. How you doing, John? Welcome.
Just fine, thanks. Good to be with you.
Excellent to have you on. Believe it or not, this took only a week to get organized, and I'm so glad to have you on. This is kind of an exclusive. I think we're going to have kind of an exclusive here. For our less Serbian followers or subscribers, do you want to give a brief intro as to who you are and why it is such an honor for me to have you on the show?
But I don't know how I can explain your honor, but I'm a Canadian-born Serb who gradually discovered his roots through a combination of events in Canada, in the United States, in Japan, and then finally over here in Serbia. And it was a long sort of lifetime voyage. I'm now in my 60s. I'm 62 years old. And I grew up in Eastern Canada in what is probably the most conservative place in North America. I mean, more conservative than Louisiana during the time of Huey Long.
And you mean old school conservative?
Yeah, really, really conservative, racist conservative. And so I grew up in a province. You know, Canada has 10 provinces. So I grew up in a province that was formed by the loyalists who left the United States because they weren't willing to live in a republic and they wanted to live under a kingdom. And they left Boston, they left New York, and they traveled up to Canada. And the area of Canada that they arrived in was called Nova Scotia. Yeah. And because they were Englishmen, they refused to live in a place named for Scotsmen because they considered Scotsmen to be subhuman. And so they petitioned King George III, who they say was mad, that to create a new province. And he refused it at first because it was going to be expensive and it was going to require new officials and new administrators. So they named the province after his family. They were Germans. He could barely speak English anyway. The English nobles are all, up until the time of this current monarch, they're all pure Germans. And King George III literally could not speak English except for a few words when he came to the throne. So to get the province named, they named the province after his German noble family house, which is Braunschweig. So they called it
Brunswick. Oh, that's where it comes from.
So it's New Brunswick. And that wasn't enough. Yeah, that wasn't enough. So they named the capital city after his beloved brother. We don't know if he was gay or what, but they named the city, the capital city, Fredericton, after his brother Frederick. And so once he got himself a request from these empire loyalists who were all for the empire, and they hated Scotsmen because they were subhumans, and they proposed to name the province after his noble house of Braunschweig, and they named the capital after his brother, then you get Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada. That's where I was born and grew up. The French, who were almost 50% of the population, were commonly referred to as frogs, French frogs, demeaning way to speak of them. And we who weren't of pure English descent. My mother has some English background, but she's a Lusatian Serb, and my father was a South Serb from Serbia. We were just called.
Oh, so you're a Serb from both sides, basically.
That's right.
Awesome.
I think you're not going to ever meet anybody who is a Serb from both sides. The Serbs who were, the Serbian people were a nation that populated the entire region from the Baltic Sea in the north all the way down to the Adriatic. And
Yeah.
the Germans, who were to the west of us, wanted to eliminate us, and so they formed an East Kingdom called Österreich, Austria, and they drove to the east in what they called Drang nach Osten, the drive to the east, which the Kaisers followed and Adolf Hitler followed, and even now NATO is following, the never-ending German drive to the east against the Slavs. And to defeat the Serbs, they cut us in half by creating a joint kingdom with the Magyars, the Hungarians. So they created a kingdom that they called Austro-Hungary, and they cut us.
This is Russian propaganda. Viewers of the channel will know that this is all Russian propaganda.
This is just straight history.
No, it's your first time. It's your first time here. It's your first time here. This is a comedy show, and everything has to be approached with a little bit of sarcasm and humor.
Well, actually, life is a comedy if you look at what's been going on.
I know it's a tragic comedy. It's hilarious. Gallows humor is what gets us through the day. I just want to clue people in that they're about to get a really in-depth look into who John Bosnitch is. He sent a collection of a bunch of photos that I'm going to have on a slideshow basically in the background. And they can be prompts for John to dive into any of the varied interesting aspects of his life story. But one of the first things that I want to get to is as a background of who you are, is why did you decide, and when, for the viewers, you told me, but let's discuss it in front of the viewers, did you decide to come back to Serbia?
Okay, that's a good question. I mean, I'll give you a little background of how I even got to the position of having to decide whether or not to go to Serbia. I grew up in Canada through coincidence or fate, because Serbs are a nation that believe in fate. Through coincidence or fate, I was born on February the 15th, which is the same as being born on the 4th of July if you're an American. So I was born on the National Day of Serbia. And when I first came over here to Serbia to visit my grandmother, who believed in seances and reading crystal balls and so on, she took my palm and read my palm, and she said, "You're going to marry a Serbian woman, you're going to return to Serbia, and you're going to be active in defending the Serbian people." And I think I was 6 years old then, and I looked at my mother. My father wasn't allowed to even come to Serbia because it was a communist country, and he had fought for the monarchy during the war and had gone into exile. So my mother brought me here, introduced me to my grandparents here, and my grandmother looked at my charts, astrological charts, and she said, "Here's a clipping that I cut out of the newspaper before you were born, before we knew you were born, and I told your grandfather, and I wrote a letter and dated it on your date of birth and said, 'John is born today.'" That letter arrived 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later in Canada, and my parents opened it and said, "How could she possibly have known that he was born on that day?" Because they had no telephone, because as not Communist Party members, there was no telephone for them. And so I was born on the National Day of Serbia, and I was born in Canada at the exact minute of a total eclipse of the sun over Kosovo. So that set my grandmother on a lifetime of, John is a chosen guy, he's going to go back to Serbia, and I really didn't understand it until much later in my life. I grew up in Canada, the son of 2 educators. My father was a professor of history and political science.
Is this your father?
Exile. Yes, that's my dad when he fought in World War II in the Allied army of the Kingdom of Yugoslavia. And on his chest there, he's wearing the equivalent of the Victoria Cross, or it's the medal, or the U.S. Medal of Valor in gold, called Mila Jovovic. Mila Jovovic is the man who killed the Sultan of Turkey by breaking into his camp and stabbing him in the heart. Well, my father got that medal for fighting not just the Nazis, not just the Italian fascists, not just the Albanian fascists. This is me laying a wreath recently in memory of our Allied soldiers who fought against fascism and fought against the Nazis in World War II. And I'm there as a member. Right behind me, you'll see the president of the National Association of the Descendants of the Fighters in World War One, when we fought against the Kaisers, the Austrian Kaiser and the German Kaiser, who invaded and tried to destroy Serbia.
Russian propaganda, I tell you.
Well, it's just a historic photo. This is laying a wreath, and behind me, you will see all of the countries that were in World War One allied with the Kaisers. You'll see the brown shaped hat of the Hungarian army there, and you'll see various other that they're all members of NATO now. They've all joined democracies, and they're the ones who are trying to suck Serbia into the EU. These things are things that I've just learned over the years. You could never learn this in school in Canada, and you never learn this in school in America, because you're taught what they want to teach you so that you're a malleable agent of the empire, the Anglo-American empire. That's me in New York State at the Holocaust Park. And that's a stone for Jadovno, which was the first death camp created by Nazi Croatia in World War II. I'm named for Jovan Bosnitch, John Bosnitch in English, who was a World War I war hero who conquered for Croatia, because it was then part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. He conquered the entire seacoast of Croatia, which is now today's Croatia. And in World War II, at the very beginning of the war, the way the Croats thanked him was by coming to his house, arresting him, taking him to a crevasse in a place called Jadovno, binding him together with 12 other people and throwing him in there alive. Some 4,000 to 5,000 people minimum were murdered that way right at the beginning of World War II, as soon as Croatia separated from Yugoslavia, the Kingdom of Yugoslavia, and joined the Nazi Pact, joined the Axis powers.
Is this him by any?
That's my grandfather, who was a commander of the Royal Guard of the Kingdom of Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes. And at the beginning of World War II, he was one of only 2 general staff officers who refused to surrender. The government of Yugoslavia surrendered. The Kingdom of Yugoslavia surrendered after a very short war, less than 2 weeks. And when they surrendered, two people of the general staff refused to surrender. One of them was my grandfather, Colonel Dusan Bosnitch, and his junior fellow colonel, Colonel Draža Mihailovic, who later led the Yugoslav army in the homeland for the duration of the war. And then at the end of the war, he was betrayed. That's Dusan Bosnitch, my grandfather, when he was in Austrian uniform. In World War I, he had finished what was called Wiener Neustadt Military Academy, which was the Austrian equivalent of West Point. He graduated there at the high end of his class, and therefore he knew Kaiser Franz Josef of Austria. He knew him personally. And when Austria decided to declare war on Serbia over the assassination of the Archduke in Sarajevo in 1914, my grandfather refused to attack Serbia. He was an ethnic Serb in the Austrian army. And so he personally approached the Kaiser and he said, I will not attack my fellow Serbs. And because he had graduated high in his class at Wiener Neustadt, the Kaiser said, okay, you don't have to attack the Serbs. I'll send you against Russia. Well, for anybody who knows the brotherly links between Serbs and Russians, that was the same thing. So as soon as Dušan's regiment faced the Russian forces, all of his ethnic Serb soldiers said, we're going over to the Russian side. And it wasn't a question of him ordering them to go over or not. There was nothing that could stop them. His regiment went over to the Russian side and traversed Russia and ended up in Kamchatka. After fighting their way across the Russian Civil War, some of them joined the communist side, some of them joined the monarchist side, but the main body of the Serbian forces fought their way to Kamchatka, and then the Japanese, who were allies in World War I, took them by boat all the way around the world back to Salonika in Greece, where they led the charge on Vienna that ended the war. You'll never learn that, of course, in school in the West.
Is this them?
No, this is my great uncle, Todor Bosnitch, Captain Todor Bosnitch, who in 1848 he got an order from the Austrian Kaiser to withdraw because there was a revolution. In 1848, there were revolutions across Europe. And one of the revolutions was led by a Hungarian named Kossuth. And Kossuth wanted to create an independent Hungary and break off from the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which was basically ruled by Germans. Kossuth attacked the lands of Austria that were all inhabited by ethnic Serbs. My ancestor, Captain Todor Bosnitch, was an Austrian officer, and he refused the death order of the Kaiser to retreat. So he and 500 Serbs took off their uniforms, put on burlap bags to camouflage themselves. There was no camouflage at that time. And the 500 of them defeated an attacking force of 7,000 Hungarians who didn't see them. They were hidden in the trees wearing burlap. And so the tiny force of Serbs defeated the Hungarians. The Austrian Kaiser did not execute him for refusing to retreat, but in fact decorated him, and he became a national hero. And that photo was taken in 1848 by none other than the inventor of photography, Louis Daguerre, who traveled in his Daguerre wagon all the way from Paris to take that photo of Todor Bosnitch, one of the first photos ever taken in the era of photography. In the first year of photography, the inventor of photography came to take that man, my ancestor's photo, because he had beaten an army that was more than 10 times larger than his, and therefore went down in the annals of European military history.
And to think that when we started off this interview, you weren't sure why I was honored to have you on. It's honored is a small word for the wealth of information that we've already gotten from these few little photos that you've shared with us. John, you've sent a lot of photos, and some of them are of women. I'm gonna scroll through here. Who is this? Is this you as a kid with your?
That beautiful woman is Mila Jovovic, the well-known actress, with my younger son, Dušan, who is actually planning to be an actor now. And as you can see, Dušan had an eye for women. If you take a good look at his eye after getting a kiss from Mila. Mila is the cousin of my ex-wife, Vesna Jovovic, who is also a model. And,
all right.
And Vesna now runs a modeling agency here in Belgrade. And when we were living in Washington after leaving Japan, she was invited by her cousin Mila to come out to Beverly Hills and visit in Los Angeles. And so she took Dushan, and Dushan met his aunt Mila. That's that photo.
All right, and this is?
That's my ex-wife, the beautiful Vesna Jovovic, in a photo I took of her on our honeymoon in
Nice. Nice, nice.
19, 1999, 2000. That's me with Prime Minister Brian Mulroney of Canada. Brian is married to Mila Pivnički, a Serbian woman, and my father was the venčani kum, in other words, the godfather at the wedding of the Prime Minister of Canada. So Brian and I are not just relatives, we're friends, and he visited here in Serbia, and we took this photo together.
Nice, nice.
And Brian,
Yeah.
importantly, is
Go
the
on.
key executive in a company called Acreage Holdings, which is one of the most important cannabis companies in the world. Brian found out about cannabis and its healing properties when he had an accident and used cannabis on a prescription, which was legal then, only on prescription, to deal with pain. And as soon as he realized the healing and curative powers of cannabis, he joined one of the leading world companies in developing the cannabis medical market.
And that's in Canada. Like you sent a
Canada
picture.
legalized, Canada legalized cannabis at the
Mhm.
federal level, and I see you're flipping through there.
Yeah, yeah. I'm looking for the one with the hemp stuff. There it is. Cannabis Business Expo.
So that was me giving. I was attending a cannabis expo, and
Mm-hmm.
I've been fighting since 2017, 2018 to get cannabis legalized here. That means
Mm-hmm.
not just industrial hemp, but also marijuana for extraction of CBD and THC for medical use. And unfortunately, there's an incredible amount of corruption here in the government. And a man posing as a police officer was growing a big field of cannabis, which he said was protected by the government. And it
Mm-hmm.
appears, I mean, the rumor is that elements of the Serbian government are engaged in selling marijuana for profit and therefore did not want to legalize the business to allow competition by the farmers of Serbia, who used to be the largest per capita producers of cannabis in the world in the 1920s and before. And
I have no idea what you're talking about. This is all myth and
this,
conspiracy
this,
theories. I have no idea what
really,
you're talking about.
this is really important. Industrial hemp and cannabis were grown in this region from prehistorical times. Um, all the boats that discovered the New World used sails made out of hemp. There was no way to get across the ocean with cotton or any other material because the salt water would have cut through the sails. So, hemp, which is a form of cannabis, a non medicinal form of cannabis,
Mm-hmm.
was mandatory to be planted in the New World. You could not farm even potatoes or corn if you did not set aside at least 10% of your land to grow hemp to provide rope and sails for the English Navy to be able to supply the colonies. And the same for France. French ships and
Yeah.
English ships and Spanish ships could not cross the Atlantic without hemp sails because hemp was the only material that could produce a textile that could resist salt water. That's the history of North America hidden from everybody for hundreds of years. Um, Now, in America, you can buy hemp hearts in any normal health food shop. You cannot buy them in Serbia because it's banned, because our government has its hands too deep into the illegal marijuana business. Hemp hearts are banned in this country. Hemp is banned in this country. Marijuana is banned in this country. And the farmers of Serbia are traveling to Croatia, and they're traveling to Romania, and they're traveling to Hungary, and they're
Hmm.
traveling to Italy to make money with the hemp business. That's how backwards our political regime is here in Serbia. Unfortunately, it's just truth. Sorry to tell it.
The views of the working brother have nothing to do with any of the views of his guests. This is a comedy show. I have no idea what you're talking about. This, like,
Exactly.
it's all like subject to
Let's
interpretation, and like how deep can you understand the sarcasm in
yeah.
John's voice, right?
It's,
Let's get back
I,
to the pretty ladies.
I too,
Who
I too
this is
strongly
your
oppose
ex. This is
anything
your
to do with.
ex-wife as well, yeah?
That's my ex, Vesna Jovovic,
Yeah,
Mila's cousin.
yeah. Um, this
That's
is.
my grandmother,
Mhm,
my grandfather Dušan's wife, Katarina Krstonašić, which means carrier of the cross. Her
mhm,
family was one of the richest 10 families in Vojvodina, the richest area of modern day Serbia. And my grandfather spotted her and spotted a beautiful, intelligent woman who spoke 6 languages when he met her. And in the end, they both spoke 8 languages. And she was a multimillionaire and the first family to bring mechanization to the farm industry of Serbia. So instead of having to draw the hoe with cattle or with oxen, they developed mechanized farming tools and became multimillionaires basically overnight by mechanizing farming in the richest farmland in Europe, which is Vojvodina.
mhm.
That's a shot of Katarina when she was just married with my grandfather.
And this
That's the
is
boss.
your family crest, yeah?
Yeah, that's the Bosnitch family noble crest. We had the title of princes during the reign of Tsar Dusan, Emperor Dusan of the Serbian Empire. And
Mhm,
on our crest, you'll see the blue of nobility, the gold, and then 2 silver symbols on the crest. the 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 star above represents the star of light and goodness with an embattled diagonal showing that they were opposed to the invading Turkish half moon. So this crest goes back to well before our era. The first archives that show that crest are in the year 1250. Um, on the crest, you'll see a lion, and it wears the coronet of a prince, and it also carries a sword on which a sword with a Christian cross on which the half moon is skewered, and that lion has a flaming tongue, which was unusual in that era of heraldry because the Bosniches were always good speakers because they were commanders of soldiers and men at arms. And that explains our crest. And you'll see below that it's written in Latin. We have an H at the end of the in Serbian, it's just Bosnic with an accent to make the ch sound, but
mhm.
in Latin they add an H to make the ch, and that's our old heraldic crest.
Viewers who are frequent here will have noticed I've gone back to my normal casual self, considering John Bosnitch has also gotten rather casual with this
Yeah, I
doc.
took my jacket off to chill here.
uh,
That's
yeah,
me speaking at the World
cannabis,
Cannabis
yeah.
Expo in Switzerland in 2021, in year 3 of my never-ending battle to legalize first industrial hemp, second medical cannabis, and third marijuana. And when I say marijuana, I'm talking about recreational use marijuana, like in
Hmm.
Canada and like in America. And the reason why, and I come from a super conservative right wing background. I didn't drink beer until I was 18. I didn't ever try any cannabis, any marijuana myself until I think I was 26 or 27, and it was outside of the country. I was so nervous. It was I left Canada before I even tried it. Um, how did I become an advocate of cannabis after being a right wing conservative political advisor to prime ministers and presidents in several countries around the world? Why? Because I looked at the statistics. In the year that marijuana was legalized in Canada, I did some research. And these are the figures that I got from the United States. The annual number of people in the United States of America in 2018 or 2019 who died as a result of smoking cigarettes was 445,000 people in 1 year. That's roughly 9 times the number of Americans killed in the entire 12 years of official American involvement in the Vietnam War. So you take the death toll of Americans over the entire course of the Vietnam War, 12 years of active fighting, and you multiply that by 9, so let's say 10, and that many people die every year or died every year in America due to the smoking of tobacco, which was completely legal. And why was it legal?
Makes me want to have a cigarette.
Yeah, okay. Why was it completely legal to kill almost 500,000 Americans per year via legal tobacco? Because the government takes an 85% tax and puts it in their pockets, and the tobacco industry pays bribes to politicians to finance their campaigns to make sure that that carcinogenic killing substance continues to get fed to American citizens. So about 500,000 a year were dying from tobacco. Then I looked at the figures for alcohol, which is of course also legal.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a figure of 103,000 Americans per year were dying because of alcohol. So that means twice the number of people killed in the entire Vietnam War every year were killed in America by alcohol. Strictly legal. A-okay, let's have a drink. Why? Because the government was siphoning tax off of what they were using to kill their own citizens and putting it in their own pockets. And the alcohol industry was paying massive bribes to politicians to keep themselves legal ever since Prohibition. And then I looked up the numbers for how many people died from the consumption of cannabis, marijuana.
Mm-hmm.
And the number was from 1776 till today, 0. 0 Americans have ever died from the consumption of marijuana. Okay, so I got a gold medal in mathematics. I won the world prize in geodesy, which is planetary mapping.
Oh, you mean like, you're not being sarcastic. You mean like literally you got a gold medal.
I won the world prize. I was number 1 in the world, the number
All
1
right.
university student on Earth in geodesy, which was
Nice.
at that time, probably still is, the most complicated and difficult form of engineering. I was also a gold medal winner of prizes in mathematics. And I did the math and I said, how can anybody justify the death of 500,000 people a year due to tobacco, another 100,000 a year due to alcohol, and simultaneously ban marijuana? There's got to be a scam. There's got to be a scam going. And you know what the scam is? That a person can get as wasted with 1 joint of marijuana as they would with $50 of alcohol if they're buying it at the liquor commission. In Canada, you had to buy alcohol at a liquor commission, or if you buy it at a liquor store in America.
LCBO, yeah.
Yeah. So a joint now in Canada, you can go to the government store for legal marijuana, you can get a joint for $6 with a high percentage of THC. And that one joint you can share with 3 or 4 friends, and you're all going to be as happy or out of your minds or whatever as you would be if you drank 20 beers. That's a big, big loss of money for the beer industry. That's a big, big loss of money for the Scotch whiskey industry. That's an immense loss of money for the politicians who had their political campaigns financed by tobacco and alcohol. And when nobody's dying from it, there's no reason for marijuana to be illegal. It's just as simple as that. And, I had to ask myself, should I go public with this view? What's going to happen to me in the super conservative Serbia, where if
Were
you
you
ever say
were you in
I was
Canada at
here,
this point? You were
no,
here, huh?
I was here living in Serbia.
Because there's that Canadian guy who made that paste. I can't remember his name or anything, but he was around from like '98. You can still find his
Well,
like videos.
well look, you remember you saw the photo of Prime Minister Brian Mulroney.
Hmm.
Prime Minister Mulroney was the leader of the Conservative Party.
Yeah.
That's the most conservative political grouping there is in Canada.
Hmm.
But because of his own experience with the pain killing capacity of cannabis, he led a bipartisan effort to legalize marijuana in Canada, along with Prime Minister Trudeau. So, in one of the very few cases in Canadian history in which the liberal, a little bit left of center, soft leftist liberals, and the right of center, hard right conservatives, led by Mulroney, cooperated to legalize marijuana and to tell the public that their ignorance about marijuana was unjustifiable. And they made a major campaign, and they literally taught the people of Canada that it's safer to smoke marijuana than it is to smoke tobacco or to drink alcohol. Okay, that's what politics is about. If you believe
Supposed to
something,
be
and you
about.
say,
Supposed to be about.
well, no, look at politics is supposed to be a relatively well-educated, honest group of people who are trying to help their citizens. When you find out a piece of information that fundamentally negates your own lifelong views, you can either lie to yourself and the public, or you can be honest. Brian Mulroney, a lifelong conservative, stopped the lying and told the people of Canada, as if he were a Republican in the United States, that the legalization of marijuana is a good thing. And it has already saved thousands of lives of people who would have died from alcohol or from tobacco. And it's going to keep on saving lives. And so long as the access to marijuana is controlled by the government, so we don't have children having accidents or falling off of ladders or something, so long as it's controlled the way alcohol was controlled in our country, I see nothing wrong with the legalization of marijuana. And I certainly see nothing at all wrong in the use of marijuana extracts and hemp extracts, such as CBD, to deal with pain, and THC to replace morphine. That's a photo of my ex-wife's cousin, Mila Jovovic, when she took, which was really brave at that time. This is years before legalization. She made the decision to tell the truth and tell people that even though she was one of the top supermodels in the world at that time, she had just done Return to Blue Lagoon, which was first done by Brooke Shields, and then she did Return to Blue Lagoon, and she was Richard Avedon, at that time the greatest model photographer in the world, fashion photographer in the world, forced Vogue magazine to accept her as one of the 50 most beautiful women in the world, even though she was only 15 at the time. And that created her career. And soon after starting her career as a model and an actress, she just said, I can't stand it. I smoke marijuana. It calms my nerves. It allows me to stay calm on the runway, on the walkway, on the catwalk. And I'm going to go public. She went to High Times Magazine, which has been a magazine in America where they have free speech. Welcome to America, not Canada, not Serbia, but where they
Well,
have free speech. And she posed on the front page of that magazine. And I spoke to her mother about it. You know, her mother was an actress and a model in Russia and in Soviet Union, in fact. And she just said I couldn't stop her. She just had her way, and good for her. Strong-willed and honest.
I don't know. You say that they have freedom of the press in the U.S. Maybe they had freedom of the press at some.
They did.
At some point, yeah.
The mainstream media decided that they were going to try and run the government for the military-industrial complex. But I don't want to dig too deep into a sensitive subject because we're going to see your video getting bumped off YouTube. And you're going to have to hide it under something in Vimeo or VKontakte in Russia to get free speech. You're going to have to follow Edward Snowden to Russia now.
Yeah. We've still got a bunch of photos here that we haven't covered. Should I continue with the interesting pictures of ladies, or should I just randomly let's put this on. Let's put this on and see what is this that you're getting at here?
This is what we're talking about just now about the media. What happened? What happened in and this is the replaying of raising the flag on Iwo Jima, I think.
Yeah.
So Biden is the flag of the military-industrial complex. The people doing the lifting now are the lying mainstream media, the lying MSM. The lying MSM is no longer I'm actually a career-long journalist. I started in journalism in high school, in the high school newspaper. I continued in university, even though I was studying engineering. I was we got the first student-owned FM radio station to get a license from the Federal Licensing Authority in Canada in my little university in Eastern Canada. So I was doing radio broadcasting. We had our own television station way back in the 70s. And then because of a clampdown on student life, I ran for president and I won the presidency of the student union at the University of New Brunswick in that province of Neue Braunschweig, New Brunswick.
Yeah.
Because Englishmen couldn't live in a place named for Scotland because that's subhuman for them. But anyway, so
the Germans fine, yeah.
I ran for president of the student union, and when I became president of the student union, I also became a member of the university senate and board of governors. And I opened the secret files that the members of the Board of Governors are allowed to open. And in the secret files, I found out about the ways that the Irving Oil Corporation bribed or was solicited for a bribe to get their name of the wife of the patriarch of that oil company. I mean, it's a big oil company, one of the biggest in the world. A gas station operator, an illiterate gas station operator, worked for Esso, Imperial Oil originally, which changed its name to Esso, and which then changed.
Oh, it was called the Imperial Oil? I didn't know that.
Yeah, Imperial Oil. Of course, Empire. What do you think?
The jokes write themselves on this show.
They named themselves Imperial Oil, then they changed the name to Esso, and then when they found out that Esso was a swear word, they changed it to in another language. I won't tell you which swear word, but you can guess Esso. And so, so they changed it to Exxon because they found that was a word that did not exist in any language in the world, and so Exxon is the descendant company from Esso and Imperial Oil. And of course,
is this you in that era?
No, that's my son, who actually looks a lot like I did at his age. That's my son, Pavle, who's my elder son. He's 22 years old now, and he's a musician. I played you his recent track.
Yeah.
You can maybe put that in the comments for people who like music.
I will do that.
Yeah, he's a I think a pretty talented young musician. He's a composer. He plays all instruments. You just put an instrument in front of him, and by tomorrow he'll have mastered it. And now he's starting a career as a musician, producing some music videos. And his brother Dusan, his younger brother, the one who you
Hmm.
saw earlier in the photo with his aunt, Dusan is now a model and an actor.
Is
And
this Dushan?
that's
Yeah.
that's Dusan, the little blonde boy who was with Mila Jovovic. So now he grew up,
And I
and
think, yeah, this is you with your sons, I'm guessing, yeah?
that's me in the Tokyo subway system. Dushan's the little one there. Pavla's and that's me at the top. That's the three male members of our little family.
This is
This
people making
this is
memes of you?
yeah, well, people have been making memes of me in Serbia for some time because I got invited onto Serbian television almost a decade ago when I couldn't say one word of Serbian. I could barely say hello.
I can already see where this is going. Keep
I
going,
mean,
keep going.
they asked me, said, "Will you come on TV?" I said, "I can't speak Serbian." They said, "Well, you just talk English and we'll translate as you speak, phrase by phrase." So I got myself in debates with some so-called Serbs over here who hate Serbia, who hate Serbdom, who hate Serbian traditions, and they hate the independence of our country, and they would rather join the EU and become a colony of Germany.
Like
And so,
second
like
Serbs,
the rest, like
drugo
the rest,
Srbijanci. I don't know how you would
that's right,
translate that.
exactly, yeah. Well, the first Serbs are the traditional former Serbian kingdom. The Drugo Serbianci are the ones who are the products of the Titoist period, where England imposed a communist dictator on Yugoslavia because they couldn't get the king to declare war on Hitler. The king was not an idiot, and
Hmm.
he wanted to have neutrality like Switzerland and Sweden. And so he signed a neutrality pact like Sweden and like Switzerland with Nazi Germany. And of course, England then said he had joined the Axis, which was not true. It was the only country in Europe that got a signed commitment that not one German soldier would touch his foot on Serbian territory. And that's because Hitler had a pathological fear of the Serbs, because as I told you already, the Serbs beat the Germans and the Austrians in World War One. You'll never learn that in school either. You've all studied world history. You've all studied World War One. Did anybody tell you that World War One was won by the Serbs? Of course not. They say that the Serbs started World War One, that the evil Serbs killed the Archduke, and that's why the whole world had to go to war. Look, just open the history book and look at the Western Front at the beginning of World War Two and at the end of World War Two. The Western Front barely moved 150 kilometers in the entire war. Then look at the Eastern Front against Russia. The Central Powers defeated Russia.
Conspiracy
When the
theories.
communists, there's no conspiracy here. When Lenin came to power, as soon as the communists came to power, they realized that they were going to have a civil war with the royalists, with the Tsarist troops. So they just surrendered. They just signed a peace with the Germans and the Austrians, and they withdrew from the war. So wait a minute now. On the Western Front, you had a stalemate called All Quiet on the Western Front, which lasted for 4 years, and they never broke through. And on the Eastern Front, the Central Powers won the war and the Allies lost because the
Hmm.
Russians withdrew from the war when it became the Soviet Union. Well, then, if the Western Front never defeated the Central Powers, the Allies, the French and the English and the Americans never defeated the Central Powers, the two Kaisers. And if the Kaisers won on the Eastern Front, well, why did they lose the war? Because those Serbs who traveled across Russia and went to Kamchatka and joined all the other Serbs who refused to surrender and who went to Africa. Did you learn that? Of course not. The entire Serbian army withdrew, retreated, and refused to surrender and got convoyed by boat to North Africa, where they got re equipped, landed back in southern Greece, and drove north towards Vienna in September 1918. Okay, now up until September 1918, it's a blocked war. That's from an earlier war. We Serbs got to keep our wars separated here.
Yeah. Let's take it one war at a time.
Let me just tell you about World War I.
Yeah.
Serb land at Salonika, Thessaloniki for a Greek person. We call it Salonika. And the Serbs were so gung-ho to reclaim their territory, which had been occupied by the Central Powers, and they never surrendered, that their king, an old man, was carried in a wooden box on the back of his soldiers, and they led their attack on foot. Okay, on foot uphill through the mountains of Greece, attacking the Germans and the Austro-Hungarians, who had mechanized armies and tanks. So they had petrol-driven trucks, petrol-carried cannons, and tanks, and the Serbs just had their bare feet, and muskets. And they attacked so fast and destroyed the Bulgarian army that the Bulgarian Tsar surrendered and withdrew. So 1 down, 2 to go. Then the Austrians were about to surrender. So the Germans sent a general named Mackensen with a skull and crossbones on his hat, which you later saw in the SS in World War II. And Mackensen tried to shore up the front, and he was defeated by the Serbs. And the Serbs drove so quickly to Belgrade and went across the border into Austria that von Ludendorff, the chief of staff of the Austrian Imperial Army, telegrammed the Kaiser, not just in Austria, but the Kaiser in Berlin, and told them both, we have to surrender, because if we don't surrender, the Serbs will take Vienna. Okay, they'll take Vienna and they'll make it the capital of a new Slavic empire. And the 1,000-year kingdom based in Vienna will fall to the Slavs and will never get it back. 1 day later, both Kaisers surrendered to keep Vienna, a Slavic city originally named Bech, which they changed to the name Vienna to keep it German. That's what happened in World War I. Von Ludendorff ordered the 2 Kaisers to surrender to save the German Österreich, East Kingdom of Germany, known as Austria. And that's and this propaganda about Austria, you can even hear it in the Sound of Music. Right? You know the songs.
Now I'm sure you're a conspiracy theorist from sent here by the Russians. You're sent here by the Russians.
How sad we Austrians are that we've been occupied by the evil Germans, but they're not Germans. Adolf Hitler was an Austrian, bro. Adolf Hitler was Austrian. It was not Germany occupying Austria. It was Austria occupying Germany. That's what happened. Don't let yourself get fooled by propaganda by people who after World War II tried to rehabilitate Austria as an innocent country occupied by Germany. It was the exact opposite. So a little bit of history that you will not learn in any book except for one French book written by a French general, which was then censored in France, Germany, England, and Austria. Okay.
Coincidence.
The lying mainstream media has been with us since the very first word was ever published.
This has been one hell of a ride through history, even for myself.
Let me tell you that the Gutenberg press, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was the first printing press. I think it was 1450 something. Well, we got one too. We had an empire. We were rich. We were far richer than Germans were. They were coming down here as gastarbeiters to dig in our mines in Silvertown. Because to have an empire, you have to have a town where you make coins. If you don't have coins, you're not an empire. So we were digging up in our Serbian mine city called Silvertown. What's Silvertown mean in English? Well, how about just translating it into Serbian? Srebrenica. Srebre is silver, Itza means small place. So Srebrenica was the capital mining site of the Serbian Empire, not a Muslim enclave,
No,
not
no,
a
please, 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 let's not go there on this first intro video. Like,
look it up, guys.
we said
Look it up.
we said we would keep it up, we would keep it divided, like, the different wars. Let's keep the different wars divided and
What?
try and stick to the try and stick to.
Just tell me in English what it means. Srebrenica means silver fountain. It was Serbian Tsar Dušan's main goal for producing silver coins so that he could put a face on the coin and say, "We've got an empire." Silver Town, Srebrenica, center of the Serbian
Let's
Empire.
let's get back to these photos.
Okay, so this is a famous painting, a Serbian. This painting is in the National Museum.
Mhm.
Okay, so there are two Bosnitches in this painting. On the right, the guy with the fist raised over his head with the light
guy.
blue pen. That guy right there, that's Todor Bosnitch, who
I was
Louis
gonna say
Daguerre,
that's the guy that we saw the first photograph of.
that's right. He is the leader of the army that crushed the Hungarian uprising in 1848. On the left is his cousin in the other blue uniform. There's only two military officers in the entire painting. Is
Here.
his cousin, and his name is Jovan Bosnitch, for whom I'm named.
Mm-hmm.
And the two of them were two Austrian officers who refused the Kaiser's order to surrender. And they led, along with General Stratimirovic, a people's general who's not painted in this painting, they led the forces that defeated the Hungarian uprising. And they were then raised to the status of nobles in Austria. And so my grandfather, who you saw in the earlier picture in the general staff uniform, there's also a photo of him when he was younger, and that photo of him when he was younger, he's in the general staff with his medals in the Yugoslav army right at the beginning of World War II when he refused to surrender. And the other photo of him, I think you've got it there. He's leaning back in his major's uniform in the Austrian army in World War I with one or two medals when he led his troops to the Russian front, and that's him. That's signed in 1912 when he got his commission. It's signed in Serbian Cyrillic, Bosnitch, 1912. This photo is just after he got his commission from the Kaiser. That's my ex-wife when she was modeling. That's Vesna Jovovic, Mila Jovovic's cousin. That's me on television here in Serbia saying that basically everything you've heard from the Western media is a lie, which
you say that often. You say that often. By the way, maybe people have seen you on like Press TV and other channels.
Yeah, look, I'm just quoting the U.S. president. If the U.S. president says that the U.S. media are a bunch of liars, I'm going to go with the president on that one.
You're talking about Trump, yeah?
In that one, I'm talking about Trump. That's the hemp business that we tried to form here in Serbia. Serbian government came under pressure from the pharmaceutical mafia, from the pharma mafia, to shut down the hemp business here, so that we couldn't extract CBD or THC for use in replacement of morphine for operations. That's THC.
Yeah.
And CBD for treatment of depression, physical pain, and so on.
We've covered a lot of topics that are dodgy here on Working Brother Talks, but the medical mafia is one that we still haven't messed with. So thank you, John, for bringing us into that sphere of the YouTube algorithm censorship. What were you going to say? This field here?
The solution here is to round your wagons because you can get shot at from all sides.
Yeah.
If you tell the truth, you're automatically cutting into the monopoly of some of the most crooked people in the world. And they come from all of the big established industries. These guys are in power and rich to the tune of billions. The tobacco industry, the alcohol industry, to the tune of billions. Now, this is when the Prime Minister of Romania asked me to. I'm sitting there in the presidential palace in Romania from the balcony, looking out. This is where Ceausescu had his last speech. There I'm working as an advisor to the Prime Minister of Romania to advise the Romanians to plant hemp and to produce a industrial hemp product and to extract it for CBD and THC. And the Romanian government accepted the advice. And the Romanian government took advice from a Serbian advisor who could not get anything done in Serbia, which is a disgrace to us. It's a failure for me to be able to convince my own people, but it's not a question of the people. The people are in favor of this. It's the government.
Time. All in good time. As I'm sure you know.
We're not giving up. There's no surrender. There's no retreat. It's in Serbian we'd say samo napred, onward only. Only forward.
We've got a couple more photos here to get through. We've already been recording for an hour, and we've yet to record some of the serious topics, so there will be a part 2 to this. So share, subscribe to all the viewers. What is this? This looks like Japan to me.
Okay, well, that's a picture of a telephone card, because you could put any photograph you want on a telephone card, and that is the house that I lived in when I lived in Japan when I first got there. I had just put 2 police in prison in Canada, and I had to get out of Canada fast. Those were the first 2 police to be convicted.
Wait, what?
Okay,
are you?
I'll try and make it short.
You have the floor.
Before you had the Floyd case in America where they killed a man.
You mean George Floyd with the knee and
with the
neck, riots?
With the knee on his neck.
Mm-hmm.
Way back in the 1980s, the same things were happening in Canada. I was routinely in Montreal and in Toronto. I was routinely intervening to defend Black people or colored people from other places who were just being stopped randomly. They never stopped being white men. They never stopped me. Nobody ever asked me for ID in Toronto or Montreal. But if you were Black and you were walking, in other words, walking while being Black, you could be routinely stopped. You would have your ID checked. You'd have your bag opened. And then I was routinely objecting to this. Anytime I saw it happen, I would come over to the Black guy who was being stopped by the police, and I'd say, hey, bro, you want to go for a coffee? And the cops would go, wait a minute. We're doing our bit. What are you doing here? I'd say, wait a minute. Is he under arrest? And they say, well, no. And I said, okay, let's go. Let's go for coffee. And they said, no, you're interfering with the work of police. I said, if he's under arrest, that's fine. Just tell me so, and I'll let you conduct the arrest. And if you are arresting him, what's the charge? I need to know the charge right now. Of course, there's no charge for being Black and walking on the street. So I was routinely taking people away from police harassment. Well, since I did that in the daytime on my way to university, every time I saw it happen, when I first got to Montreal, I had no money at all because I was still suing my former university, which expelled me for politics back in New Brunswick. Remember, right-wing Neue Braunschweig? So I was expelled from university over there, and I was suing them to get my degree. Even though I won the world prize in geodesy, they kicked me out of the university, and they had the big map that I made and won the world prize on the wall of the same faculty that they expelled me from. So I was going back and forth to New Brunswick to sue the university there. And I was staying in Montreal with 2 girls I met who didn't speak French. And so I said, look, girls, I don't have any money because I have to go and fight the lawsuit. But if you let me sleep on the couch, you girls got the 2 bedrooms. If you let me sleep on the couch, I'll do all your translating for you. And I'll, be your escort around Montreal because you don't even know where the nightclubs are. I do. So I went to meet them one night at this nightclub. And in the middle of the night, the police came to clear people out from in front of the club. There was a young student there, a law student, who didn't speak French. They gave him an order. I was just 3 meters away. They gave him an order that he didn't understand in French. He went in the wrong direction. They beat him literally to within an inch of his life.
They being RNCP.
Right in the middle of the street. They smashed his face into the trunk of the car. They called for backup. More police came. They used a truncheon on the back of his neck, on his head, on his face. They smashed out, they chipped his teeth. He was covered in blood.
And this was back in what year?
1987 in Montreal,
87.
Canada.
Hmm.
Yep. So I thought they were going to kill him. They would just not. I started to yell. I started to yell at the guy because he was still conscious. I said, "Don't resist. Don't resist." And he yelled at me in English. He goes, they're get this off. He yelled at me in English and said, "I'm not resisting." And then he went unconscious. And they kept beating him. So I yelled at the cops. I said, "Stop beating the man. He's unconscious." And they didn't do anything. And then I realized that this guy's going to get more beating because they only started to pack him in the car when they saw that too many witnesses were objecting. So I needed to know who the police were, and they were already in the car, and he was already in the back bleeding with his face against the window. So I took a little bit of a radical Serbian kind of response. I lay down on the road in front of the car. So they couldn't back up. There was a truck parked there. And they couldn't go forward because there's 50 witnesses and there's a guy lying on the road, and they would definitely kill me if they drove forward. So they used the megaphone to yell at me to get out of the way. And I said, "I'm only getting up when you get out of the car and give me your badge numbers." So they were revving the engine and squealing the tires. And finally they got out and I saw their badge numbers, number 69 and 70. And I yelled out their badge numbers to the 50 witnesses. And I said, "You don't have to arrest me. I'm going to run to the police station right now." I ran the 10 blocks to the police station. I said, before I ran, I said, "By the way, if I get there before you, if you take a detour to try a lesson down at the dock," which is what always happens in big cities where there's nobody around, they teach you, they learn you for another 30 minutes. I said, "If I get there on foot faster than you get there in the police car, this is going to be twice as bad as it is now." And then I started to run. So they got him in there, and I showed up and I put my name in and I got proof that I was there. I took a piece of their letterhead and I folded it in half and I clocked it into their time clock when they weren't looking.
Smooth.
To cover up the crime, they charged him with assaulting an officer, 5 years in jail. He was advised by his parents, who were conservative people from monolingual Alberta, English Alberta, plead guilty and get a pardon. And I told him, if you get a pardon, you can never be a lawyer, even if with a pardon, because the Bar Association will never accept you as a lawyer if you're accused and convicted of assault on a police officer. So he had to fight, and I was his witness. And he got out of the jail the next morning. I took slide photos of him, all the bruises, all of the injuries.
Yeah, and documenting it.
I had the date stamped letterhead of the police station. And since we're the defense, we don't have to provide any evidence to the prosecution. So the prosecution came in with 12 police who all lied. They said I didn't come to the police station, I was never there, and that they did not touch a hair on his head. So the judge put me on the stand, and the judge was a typical conservative judge, and he goes, "Mr. Bosnitch," this was in French, and they didn't know that I could speak French.
Monsieur Bosnitch, vous ne parlez pas français.
Yeah, well,
I love it when people assume that you don't speak their language. It gives you, it's always like a card up your sleeve. Continue, sorry to interrupt.
Here in Serbia, and I learned the language. They assumed that in Quebec, and I knew the language. They assumed that in Japan. And I knew what they were saying, which was really, really convenient. If you're sitting in a room with people who are talking secretly among themselves, with you in the room because they know that you can't speak Japanese, that gives you a real edge. I used that edge. But anyway, they put me on the stand. They started to ask me questions in English, like they had asked the victim of the beating. And I said, "Oh, you can ask me." I just changed into French. I said, "You can ask me in French." And the whole jury had been selected on the basis of people who hate English people and who knew that the victim was unilingual English and he deserved what he got. And here's the crown witness The defense witness speaks
Et
very
encore, il est francophone.
well. Yeah.
Yes, mon Dieu.
J'ai commencé mes études en Suisse quand j'avais 5 ans. That means I started my school in French. My first year in school was in Switzerland in French. So I speak French. And the minute I started speaking French,
Wait, now that you said that you started learning French in Switzerland, I have to make the French joke of like Swiss French is not really French because they count up to 70 and devant. you know.
but that there's a defense for the Swiss, and that is that you
It
cannot
makes sense.
you cannot do business in a language that here come the numbers: 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 60 plus 10, 4 times 20, and 4 times 20 plus 10, 100. That's what the 10
Counting,
the 10
in French is.
10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 60 plus 10, 4 times 20, 4 times 20 plus 10, 100. That's what it is. 70.
Oui, je sais.
70 is 70. 60 plus 10 is 70. 80, no such word. It's 4 times 20. What? Pardon? Yeah, the number 4 times 20 plus 4, 84. And 96. 4 times 20 plus 10 plus 6. Easy. Right. What was that number? 4 times 20 plus 10 plus 6. 96. Obviously, the Swiss, who like money and do business, are not going to follow the French standard for how not to speak in numbers.
No comments. That was brilliant. Thank you. Let's try and draw back to like the courtroom and you in French.
So I go on the stand, and the judge looked at me and goes, I've looked at the documents provided about you by the police, and we've got an RCMP CSIS officer here. I go, what?
Royal Canadian Mounted Police
Canadian Mounted Police and a CSIS officer. CSIS is CIA. CSIS is the Canadian Security Intelligence Service. And he testified against me, saying that this is a radical extremist from a student union, got expelled from student union. We should not be believing him against 12 decorated police officers. The judge puts me on the stand and he tries to speak to me in English. And I said, oh, you don't have to speak to me in English. I speak French, of course. I live here in Quebec. That shocked half the jury right away. Now it's not a French versus English thing. It's a fellow French speaker who started school in French. And then he goes, well, why should I trust you? I mean, you're a student radical. You got expelled from university. Why should I trust you over 12 decorated police? I said, I wouldn't do it either, sir. That would be stupid. He goes, well, why are you witnessing here? Why are you giving testimony? I said, because I just want you to believe that I have a hobby and that hobby is useful. He goes, well, okay, what's your hobby? I said, photography. And I pulled the slides out and I gave him a slide viewer and I leaned over and I gave him first the letterhead with the date stamp, 4:30 a.m., Station 25, letterhead. Proves I was there, I was at the station, and I was there at the time, that all 12 of them lied and said I wasn't there. Okay, no problem. Then I give them the slides. And the slides, why did I use slide film? I'm a photography instructor. I'm a professional photographer. Why did I use slide film instead of black and white and print negatives or color film and print nice big color blow? Why? Because when you shoot slides, the film is your product. You can't print it lighter or darker. You shoot a slide, it is as it was. If it was light or it was dark or he was bruised or he was bleeding, you cannot modify it.
Yeah.
I shot the photos of this guy at 12 noon, 4 hours after he got out of the jail, and I took them to 1 hour development, and I got the receipt, and I got the date and time of development stamped on each of the cardboard slide holders, and I passed them to the judge. He looked at the 30 slides of the blood and the bruises, and he just adjourned the trial. He goes, "You're innocent. Get up. You're released."
Mm-hmm.
And then he ordered the police prosecutor to come forward. He goes, "This is a shame and disgrace for the police force." And then he called forward the man, my friend now. We've been friends ever since.
As like one would expect, years. Yeah.
Well, I think I saved his life, and we became very good friends. He
came and visited me, as they say on Francais.
You know, he came forward, and the judge said to me, he said, his name is David Cowling. He's an excellent young man, and the judge said to him, I said, I would sue because this is a travesty, and I think you should sue for damages. And he did, and he won. After we won the case, and after the police were convicted, the prosecutor came to me and he goes, "Congratulations." I mean, we had to really fight hard to find a prosecutor who would prosecute.
I have to ask, sorry to interrupt, but like travesty, yeah. When you use it like that, I know what it means like offhand, but like it actually has a legal definition, like a travesty of the law, right?
A travesty means a complete, outrageous
inversion,
assault on the principle of the law.
Mm-hmm.
It's a travesty. It means that it's a violation of the concept of justice.
Mm-hmm.
So the judge said this is a travesty.
Yeah.
That's just like the book written about Milosevic, Travesty.
Yeah.
The way Milosevic was railroaded, the way Milosevic was denied a fair trial, and the way Milosevic mysteriously died in his cell with medicine in him that he did not have a prescription for, and which preceded his death by mysterious heart attack. Otherwise, he would have been acquitted. If Milosevic were acquitted, then the invasion of Serbia and the takeover of Serbia by NATO would have had no legal basis. And then that would have been a war crime. And then NATO would have been guilty of war crime. So just for those of you who find it strange that I come from a family that was related to the king, my grandfather, who you saw from the general staff, was a cousin of the king of Yugoslavia,
mm-hmm.
that I come from a royalist background and that I defended Milosevic has nothing to do with the man. It has to do with the justice.
The principle, yeah.
Or is he guilty? And a communist can be innocent just as well as anybody else. You know,
or can be a victim of like.
But anyway, right after the ruling in which the police were convicted and ordered to go to prison and so on, the prosecutor came over and he said, you know, and the defense, the defense lawyer came over and they said, "Well, where are you going to go now?" I said, "What do you mean? I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to do my master's degree." I said, "No, you aren't." I said, "Well, why not?" He said, "Well, the police union gave you 30 days. I said, 30 days to do what? Apologize for convicting them in a court of law? I said, no. 30 days, or after 30 days, they can't guarantee your safety. I said, "They can't guarantee my safety? I don't need a safety. What safety? It's Montreal." They said, "What they're guaranteeing is it's going to be unsafe for you to stay in Montreal." I said, "What? This is Canada." "Yeah, John, look, if you don't leave within 30 days, you're going to be an accident. There's going to be a glint of light in the night in a dark alleyway, and you're not going to make it." And that was like the shock of my lifetime. I was a Boy Scout. I was a student leader. This
was age student. What?
What's that?
How old were you at this point?
26. Doing my master's in political science and history at McGill University, our best university in the country, the alma mater of my father, who graduated from McGill with a doctorate in political science and history.
And then you got like the turbo course in geopolitical history and realpolitik on the streets of Canada, huh?
I got 30 days to live. And I said, okay, I mean, if that's really what it's like. And they said, yeah, it is, John. You're going to be dead in 31 days. I said, okay, then I don't know. I mean, it was a shock, right? But then I said, okay, I'll go to Columbia. I can transfer from McGill to Columbia in New York. No, John, you can't. I said, why not? It's one police union, all of North America. You go to New York and they're going to get you there. And then I thought, oh, what? And I said, well, you mean I got to leave my home country, Canada? I can't even go to the States and study? And just then, one of my vice presidents, because when I was in student union, you saw those photos before, I was the longest serving student union president in the history of North America. I was 4 years as student union president. The more I stayed, the more corruption I found, the more bribery, the more evil, the more violation of everything you can imagine. And I just kept digging. Well, they expelled me from the university to get me out of there. Then I went to Montreal and my dad said, John, just don't do politics anymore. Just study. And I studied and I witnessed this police brutality. Now I have to leave North America. And one of my vice presidents had gone to Malaysia and he had done quite well in business. And he said, John, just come to Malaysia. I'm getting married with my Chinese Malaysian girlfriend. I'm going to send you $5,000. Come on over here right now. So I got on the plane and I went to Malaysia. And when I got to Malaysia, there was a confirmation from the lawyers in Canada that, yeah, no, you can't come back for months. And so this guy gave me another.
Wait, how does that look? Like the confirmation from the lawyers telling you that the police union is going to wants to kill you?
You can't just disappear for an hour or two.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot come back for a long time.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, well, let's just go for 6 months or something. And my friend said, look, I'll front you the money, no problem. So I went from Malaysia to Singapore to Thailand. I had an insanely wild time in Thailand. We won't talk about that on television. Then I went to Burma.
So you did like the Southeast Asia trip before it was cool, basically.
Okay, look at it this way. When I landed in Asia, I landed at Hong Kong Airport out of Vancouver. We had a stopover for one night en route to the fellow's wedding in Malaysia.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, let's go to a nightclub. Why not? Came in the nightclub in Hong Kong. And I suddenly realized what it was like to be a girl in North America being chased by the boys. It's exactly the opposite of what we grew up with. Men having to ask girls out, or boys having to ask girls out, men asking women out, men chasing women to get a wife. It's the exact opposite. I walked in to a nightclub in Hong Kong, and a beautiful 6 foot tall Chinese model, gorgeous, came over to me and said, are you staying here in the nightclub for a little while? And I said, yeah, I hope so. I mean, I was like, okay, I'm 26. I don't like to give too much detail here, but I hadn't slept with 10 women in my life. Far from it. Okay, so she just looked at me and she said, do you like me? I said, well, what's not to like? And she just turned on an angle and just fell into my arms and said, then take me. And that was John Bosnitch's arrival in Asia. And
the good old times.
It got wilder from there. It's a totally different paradigm. You
John,
can't. I couldn't
I
walk down the street. I'm not saying that I was nobody special. You couldn't walk down a street in an Asian city without
hmm,
the women chasing the men,
yeah.
especially Western men, because they thought we were going to be more communicative, more open. There was good reason. We were outside of their society, and we spoke. We spoke with the women, and for them, we were more compassionate and more
Hmm.
approachable. Anyway, so I made it. I made it over there. I stayed there, and I ended up traveling to Burma, to India, to Nepal, to the Himalayas. And in the Himalayas, I meet two Canadian guys who've been to Japan. I'm nowhere near Japan. I'm Malaysia, Southeastern Europe, Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
Two guys are sitting at a campfire, and they're arguing. They're furious, and they're Canadian. So I walk over, and we're up in the Himalayas, and I say hi. And they go, yeah, we made about $2 million over the past few years in Japan. We opened a consulting company, and we packed up. We're just going to close the company down. And then we just got a message from our company secretary that we're going to pay a minimum of $50,000 fine, company closure fee. And we don't want to pay that. That's $50,000 for nothing. And I thought, you made it how much? They said, yeah, we made about 2 million. I said, how long? It's about 5-6 years. You made 2 million in 5 or 6 years? Yeah, we're consultants. I said,
This is
about
back
what?
in the day when 2 million was actually money,
This is
as
a lot
opposed to
of money.
today.
My
Yeah.
lifetime of work in 2-3 years, 4 or 5 years max.
Hmm.
And I said, really? And what's the problem? They said, yeah, well, we're gonna have to pay 50,000, at least 50,000 cash to close our company. I said, well, what do you charge for your services? They said, oh, 300-400 an hour. I said, 300-400 an hour. 300 or 400 an hour. So you mean 16,000 a week? Yeah, on average. You mean like almost 80,000 a month? Yeah. I said, I'll buy your company. They said, what? I said, I'll buy your company for $1. You don't have to pay the 50. So they sold me the company in the mountains in the Himalayas. I went back to Canada. I bought some Persian silk carpets up there in the mountains, handmade silk carpets. Bought 6 of them with all the money I could get from credit card. I had no money. I just used the credit card, maxed it out, bought the carpets. Carried these 6 silk carpets on my back all the way back down the buses and hitchhiking, all the roads, all the way back down to Malaysia. And then shipped the carpets to Canada. I bought them for $300 a carpet. I sold them for $3,000 each, 10 times
Hmm.
in Canada. Then I took that money and I got an airplane, went to Japan, went to their office, and there was one secretary sitting there. And I said, "Hi, I'm the new boss. I bought the company. Here's the paper."
Hmm.
And she goes, "What about the 50,000?" I said, "Just file that in the shelf. The company's not closing." And then I got the company. I got the company client list.
Hmm.
President of Sony, president of Hitachi, president of Panasonic, president of, I mean, every Japanese company was their client. And Prime Minister's Office of Japan. And I had no idea how to get there. And I met an older Japanese guy who was somehow associated with that company. He worked as a translator. For who? Henry Kissinger and Zbig Brzezinski. Zbig Brzezinski was the roommate of my father at McGill University, the former security
Okay.
advisor to the President of the
John,
United States.
John, seriously, time out. It's already been like an hour and 29 minutes and 23 seconds officially. Um, you've got so much more to say, and there's so much more here. I have to call this the first half of this interview
Okay, let me
or
just
this
tell you what
talk.
that photo is with that little shack.
Yeah.
That little shack.
No. Tell us in the second half when we come back. When we come back, so that people have to subscribe. Everybody like, share, subscribe. I've never heard this part of John. This was an amazing talk, John. Thank you for coming by. Say hi to everybody, and we'll be right back. We'll be right back.